Hi there, Liron here, and today we're going to talk about light and shadow and how to shade. What's up, Liron here. Thank you for joining me in another video. I'm recording this from the sofa in my studio, which is a fun setting. I never used to record a video before, so I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me give you a bit of background story on the video you're about to watch. So I've been working for the past month or 2 months, forgot how to talk, for the past 2 months on a Udemy course on sketching a car. It's going to be just a quick video tutorial kind of course. It's going to be quick, cheap, and I just want more people to use it because it's going to be simple. And in working on that course, I worked on this lecture that's going to be about shading and light and shadow. And I think it's really good. It's very quick. It's like a 5-minute guide to shading and using light and shadow. It talks a bit about the logic behind light and shadow and how it works, very basic things. And then it talks about the technique that I like to use, so cross-hatching, lots of straight lines, lots of a fun technique for me that I enjoy using a lot. So I just thought you could benefit from it, and it's just one lecture out of the course, so it's okay to just kind of put it out there for free. So I really hope you will enjoy this one. I think there's a lot of value to unpack here. So as a quick thank you to you, I just thought it would be nice to release it here as well. Okay, so I hope you enjoy this one. Let's get started with the demo. Okay, so let's get started here talking about shading and shadows and cast shadows and all of that good stuff. So first I'm going to start with pencil, but because we're finalizing our sketch and we're doing a pen sketch, I'm going to show you the technique itself using pen and ink as well. So first we're going to start with direction. Okay, and direction is something really important when it comes to light and shadow. The direction from which the light source comes can really influence the way the shadow looks. So let's say I have this boxy shape here, it's on the ground, and I have light coming from this direction. What happens is the areas that aren't hit by light, which are this part here, because the light comes from here, this blocks the light from here, these are the areas that are going to be in the shadow, okay? And I'm going to revisit this example in a few moments because I want to show you a few interesting things. Now this is the shadow that will be cast by this object, but then we also have the shaded parts of the object itself, okay? So because this part isn't in direct contact with the light, it's going to be a little darker, and this one's going to be even darker still. We're going to talk about that in a few moments, okay? So, or rather we can do that now. So what will happen is that some areas of the shadow are going to be darker. There's going to be shadow within the shadow. And I'm going to delve deeper on that in just a few moments here when we talk about inner shadows. And we're going to add another final ingredient in just a few moments when it comes to the qualities of the cast shadow. So let's look at another example with a different direction. So let's say the light comes from here. The shadow is going to cast in directly in our direction. So we have this cylindrical shape here. This part is invisible, and the light will cast the shadow towards this direction, towards us, okay? Now let's take another shape that's a little more unique here. Let's say light comes from here, and we have this weird triangular shape that stands on its tip. So we'll have the shadow casting in this direction, and again it will imitate the shape of the object, and that's something really important. It's going to imitate its shape. So if we have the light source coming from here, it's going to follow the shape of the object. This is going to follow the top shape of the object, which is round. Okay, and this is going to follow the shape of the object, which is triangular. Okay, like this. Now, one more thing to bear in mind is the distance of the cast shadow from the surface. Okay, so when the object is laying directly on the surface, we're going to get a very sharp cast shadow. Okay, so let's say light comes from the top here. We're going to get a very sharp, dark shadow. And of course, there's going to be a shadow on this ball as well. Okay, so we have, you can imagine, these are 3 basketballs running at different distances from the ground. So we're going to have this kind of shadow. Now, this basketball is farther away from the ground, so the shadow kind of diffuses, and you get this more of a light shadow that's a little less prominent than this one, okay? Another basketball. And finally, the last one, up to some distance is going to be barely visible because of the distance from the ground, depending on the light conditions. If there's a very strong sunlight or artificial light coming in, you'll still get a sharp shadow at different distances, but it is, as a general rule, going to get sharper with this kind of situation compared to this one. Okay, so that's one important thing to bear in mind. And of course, these have a cast shadow on them. So the same thing applies when the object touches the ground. So let's say we have again this triangle here. So this part that's closest to the object is going to be a little darker, and then the further away we go, the lighter the shadow becomes. Okay, so that's another important thing. Now let's talk about inner shadows. So let's say light comes in this example with this box from here. So we're going to have this side in the shadow. Pretty much every side is going to be in the shadow, except for the side that we cannot see. And this is something I still haven't shown you. This one should be in the shadow as well. So let's say, I'm just going to do a quick demo of this as well. So let's say we have this additional cylindrical shape here, and the light comes from this direction, which we can see. Then this side is going to be darker, and the shadow is going to cast in that direction, say. Okay, so this is the opposite of this example, this one. So hopefully that makes sense. I just figured that I didn't show you this scenario as well. But in any case, here, light comes from here. This is dark, this is dark, this entire thing is dark, and these sides are dark. The thing is, these sides do have some light visiting them, unlike these sides that are a little more obscure. Okay, so this is going to be a little darker, this is going to be a little darker, shadow is probably going to be a little darker, and just like I showed you earlier, it's going to start dark and then slowly become a little lighter. And this can be true also for these kinds of shapes as well. Now here's what I want to show you. There's the inner shadow inside the object, and it's going to have, again, darker areas near the corners. So this one's probably going to be a little darker in that sense. See what I mean? These are all things you want to take into consideration when you're shading. I will add this though, the best way to approach this is observation. Direct observation. That's the only way of really being able to shade properly. You have to observe the subject. Later on, when you have more experience, you can make things up. I actually will make some things up in this demo, in the upcoming demo, but for now, you want to make sure that you carefully observe, okay? So that's it when it comes to, generally speaking, light and shadow. Next, I'm going to bring my pens and I'm going to start showing you the technique for that. So the basic technique that I'm going to show you is cross-hatching, and I'm going to demonstrate it. It's very simple. All you have to do is draw a bunch of parallel lines, and that's how we darken stuff, okay? So I'm going to do just a bunch of parallel lines. And you can control how dark they are by the density. So if you'll have lines that are very far in between, you'll get a very light value. It's not going to be dark, that's values. And then if you slowly increase or rather decrease the distance between them, you see how you get a much darker and darker and darker value, all the way until you get a black value, completely dark, okay? So that's the basic technique, just parallel lines, and it's actually a very good exercise. You can just go like this and fill in different shapes, okay, with parallel lines. And you see I'm not doing a perfect job here, I'm doing it rather quickly, but I could go a little slower and get it to be a little more accurate. Now let's talk about the next layer. So if you want to darken this more, we will use an additional layer on top of it. Now here's my recommendation. Unless you have a specific goal in mind, avoid the 90 degrees. So if your first line goes that way, don't go that way. Rather go this way, okay? At a 45-degree angle instead of a 90. That's just my recommendation. It usually works well for me, but you can switch it around, try and see what works for you. Sometimes I do go like this as well, okay? But for the most part, I recommend you go at a bit of an angle like this, okay? Now you can really control how much you darken something up, and I can just demonstrate on this, for example. So if I want to shade this using pen and ink, all I have to do really is, I'm just going to go over some of that. So all I have to do, and I'm going to switch to a thinner pen here, is to do a first layer that's going to darken everything up, okay? And when I say everything, I mean everything, including this side that's not as dark, but still isn't exposed to light, okay? And we're going to talk about direction in just a moment here. So I have this first layer, then I come back with a second layer and darken whatever needs further darkening a little more. Okay, so that includes this cast shadow here. And then I can come back with an additional layer and darken what's really needs a little more darkening, like this. I could go at the same direction, different direction, but generally speaking, this is the technique. Now, one more thing to take into consideration is if you have this kind of shape, just a random shape, and you want to fill it up with cross-hatching, going like this in this direction is going to be really hard because you have to pull tons of long lines. But if you go in this direction, see how it gets much easier? You don't have to cover these huge distances and then you'll mess it up. And so you want to do this technique using it in the direction that's beneficial to you. Okay, now another thing, the direction can influence the texture. So if you're drawing a piece of cloth or fabric or something like this and you have creases and folds in it, not the best example, but an example, sometimes going with the direction of the flow of the cloth will help. Okay, so that's another thing to have in mind. Instead of just going at a random direction, maybe going with the same direction can help you convey the three-dimensionality of the shape. So that's it. Now, in terms of layering more layers, so first layer we go like this, second layer at a 45 approximately degree angle, and then the next one has to be at a 90-degree angle because you have nothing left. It's going to be either 90 degree to the second layer we put, or it's going to be 90 degree to the first layer we put. Okay, it doesn't really matter. So if we're going to be really careful about it, I just want to show you how these add up. You have this kind of a little thing going on, then you have a second layer, and I know I did 90 degree, then you have a third layer, and you have a fourth layer, and that's how you build different levels of darkness, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. This is all there is to it, really. We talked about light and shadow in general, then I showed you how to do the technique itself. This is my favorite. There are plenty of other ways of doing this. You don't have to do cross-hatching at all. You can use different scribbles. A lot of people do portraits even, and very detailed and beautiful work just with scribbles. I could sketch this basketball, for example, just using scribbles and just by indicating where the light and shadow parts are, and then do squiggly lines for the details of the basketball. And it's going to take time, it's going to be tedious. This is why I like this approach, but feel free to experiment. I actually encourage you to not listen to me and experiment, see what works for you. So in any case, I hope that makes things clearer. It really depends on the object too. So if you're going to do a tree, this kind of a texture could work really well for creating light and shadow, and then you can do the tree trunk like this, and bam, you're done. It looks really good. So it really depends on the subject you're working on. So hopefully that makes sense. And with that being said, we can wrap up this lesson. So this is it. I really hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know in a comment what you think, because originally I filmed it with the purpose of the course in mind, and so it may have a bit of a different vibe from my other YouTube videos, but hopefully it's still enjoyable, you're still able to learn from it. I really hope you enjoyed this one. If it did help you, I'm very curious to know what's like the main your main takeaway from this from the video that helped you. Okay, this is really interesting to me. I would just, as a final tip, tell you that I think the main thing really is to pay attention to the world around us. That's the main thing for me. The answers are always in front of you, so if you're unsure about how to represent something, especially with light and shadow, that can be quite complex. There's reflective light, there's all sorts of advanced lighting conditions. Especially in those instances, I think it's really useful to just observe and use all the means you have at your disposal, meaning if you're painting from a picture, you can turn it black and white, you can turn it, play around with the histogram to have a better understanding of what you're looking at. Even if you're outside painting from observation, you can always snap a quick pic and then turn it black and white on your phone or iPad or whatever, and you can see the values more accurately. So that's what my final tip to wrap this video up. But if it helped you in some kind of way, really curious to know what was the main takeaway you have from this video. So with that being said, I want to thank you so much for your support and for following me and for watching the videos. I'm really putting a lot of work on Instagram, so I think you may be interested in checking that out. I put tons of stories there so you can get a live update on what I'm doing, like working on a sketch for the course, working on a new episode of The Paint Show, which I'm going to do in just a moment. So a lot of things that I think will be interesting to you as well. And if you're also thinking about creating an income around your art, I'm trying to talk more about the things I do outside of just painting and creating, okay? So thank you so much once again for watching, and I will see you again in another vid real soon.